our next special guest is David Southwood from Imperial, who's here. Professor David Southwood, who's going to be talking about Mars, the moon, and where we're going in terms of space exploration. Now, we've touched a little bit on that already. We've been talking to Susie Imber about what it takes to be an astronaut. We've got an Apollo spacesuit behind us. I don't know if David is going to talk about the old days, the Apollo days of going to the moon, but we are going back to the moon, certainly in the next decade. And I think that is very, very exciting. So I'm going to hand over now to Professor David Southwood, who's going to do a little 20-minute presentation to talk about some of these issues. And then I'll come back to you at the end and we'll have a bit of a question and answer session. So over to David.
Thank you very much, Dallas. It's an enormous pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And we're going to do a little bit of space exploration. Mars and Moon, the next giant steps. And why are we going there? We'll think about that. In a way, that's for you to answer, because your generation is going to be the one that goes back to the moon and maybe even to Mars. So, seasons come once a year, don't they? Summer, spring, but it's Mars season again, and Mars seasons come over only every 2 years. So if you go out tonight and look to the east just after it's got dark, you will see what looks like a bright star, but it isn't twinkling. It's a planet, and if you look at it, you'll see it's red. It's got a reddish tinge. That is Mars. You can go out this evening, I've checked, and the weather might be clear enough, and look out. If you're in the northeast, you look out towards the sea, and there will be Mars. And frankly, what's on my mind at the moment is the spacecraft that are on their way to Mars, because once Mars appears in our sky every couple of years, you can guarantee somebody will have been sending spacecraft there. And this is the planet. It's red. It's got a real red tinge. It looks rusty, and in a way, that's the reason it's red. But it's got ice caps, you can see, white caps at north and south. And in some degree, it looks a little like the Earth, but you can't see any water. But actually, it's very different from Earth. At some point, Mars lost its atmosphere. Nonetheless, there's a little atmosphere there, and we're going to use it. We'll see that in a minute. Okay, so who is off to Mars? Well, there are 3 missions launched in July of this year. That's because that's the time every 2 years when you need to launch if you're going to Mars. The first one to launch is from a country you may never have heard of, the United Arab Emirates. It's their first space mission. It's called Al-Amal, and that means, when I translate it from Arabic, hope. And indeed, our friends in the United Arab Emirates feel that space exploration, looking out into the universe, gives everybody hope. The next spacecraft to be launched on the 23rd of July, was called Tianwen in Chinese, and that translates to heavenly questions. That's going to Mars, and then finally at the end of July, on the very last day second from last day of July, Mars 2020, the Americans sent a Mars 2020 mission with 2 things on it with different names, Perseverance and Ingenuity. Perseverance is going to be a rover. It's about the size of a small car, like a Mini. And Ingenuity is the thing I'm most excited about. It's a helicopter. How can you fly a helicopter on Mars when Mars doesn't have very much atmosphere? We'll see. So back to the United Arab Emirates. There's their little baby. They say Arab civilization once played a great role in contributing to human knowledge, and they want to play that role again. I don't know whether you know it, but the Arabs did much of the early astronomy, and they also invented an awful lot of mathematics. algebra is from the Arab name for maths. Okay, so the United Arab Emirates don't have a launch site yet, so they had to get somebody to do it. So they used the Japanese. There is a Japanese rocket on July this year taking off from Kagoshima in the south of Japan. And you see there's the sea, that's the Pacific Ocean beyond. Beautiful site for a launch site, isn't it? And that's taking off to go all the way to Mars, carrying HOPE, the spacecraft. And the spacecraft's going to explore what remains of Mars's atmosphere. So it's playing its part in putting together the big picture of Mars. Who else is going to Mars? Well, I said the Chinese, Tianwen, heavenly questions. They're going to arrive in February next year, as will HOPE. And they're going to try and, they will go into orbit and they'll drop down a little rover onto the surface. So that will start exploring the geology of Mars and so on. And then who else? Well, who else but the Americans? That's what's coming. They'll all be there. They'll all arrive around the same time in the spring of next year. They're on their way now. Can't stop them. And here is what the Americans are going to do. You're looking there at the camera on their big rover, Perseverance. This is a video showing real pictures of Mars against which they've put their little simulations of, here is the helicopter, Ingenuity. What's it for? Well, it will fly around taking pictures of the surface of Mars, and it can look over large distances. Then it'll land and it'll call home, not to the Earth, but to give the rover information about what's there. Here is the helicopter being tested at JPL in America. And look, it's practically in a vacuum because the air there has to be just like Mars, and there is very, very little atmosphere. It's a fifth of the pressure of our atmosphere. And there you see it does fly, and it's because it's immensely light. If that works, that will change the way we can explore, because rovers have to move very carefully. If you can fly, boulders and things don't make such a problem for you. Okay, so that's all to come, fingers crossed. If the helicopter doesn't work, there still is this massive car-sized rover, so Perseverance will persevere. Okay, so what next? They were launched, as I said, in July, and where are they going to land? Possibly the nicest thing for me is that they're landing very close, not that they'll be able to go, but very close to where the British lander Beagle 2 landed nearly 20 years ago. Unfortunately, Beagle 2 landed successfully, but couldn't phone home to Earth because its antenna didn't open. Oh, so frustrating. Anyhow, let's hope everything goes well with Perseverance and Ingenuity. Okay, so what's the next question? Well, let's come a little closer to home. Mars is not so far away, but the Moon is the nearest object in the solar system to us. It's our satellite. And there's a new moon race on. I took this from a newspaper, and it's asking a question: is China already ahead? Well, there's a short answer to that: no. But perhaps they're in danger of overtaking the Americans. Let's take a look. Well, the Americans 50 years ago managed to land on the moon. Here are the astronauts on the moon, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, putting up the American flag beside their lander. was very, very important for me. I worked for the BBC on the coverage of Apollo when I was still a student. I got time off to work for the BBC, and it was such a great experience being involved in watching the first steps on the moon. Other people have been to the moon and explored it. We sometimes forget, actually, not long after Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin there, a robot went there. It was a Russian robot, and it was called Lunar Gateway, which sounds pretty exotic until you can speak Russian. That means moon walker. Now, it didn't walk, it rolled, but I think that's more or less the same. Moon roller is also the same word in Russian. So Lunar Gateway, quite a big device. You can see it's the size of a motor car, and that was the first robot exploration of the surface of the moon, following on the American astronauts. So the Americans, though, did even better. They had a car on the moon. It was called the Moon Buggy, and boy, wouldn't I have loved to drive that. Look at this. And watch it, he's going to do a wheelie. You watch. Down on in Houston, where they were watching, the controllers said, "Oh God, no, tell him to slow down." But in fact, he wasn't really going very fast. It's around 12 kilometers an hour, I think, but it looks kind of fast here, doesn't it? And doesn't it look fun, driving over the lunar surface? This, maybe we'll see in a very, very short time, we'll see this sort of thing being done on the moon again. So let's come back to that moon race. Is China already ahead? I answered that, but China is definitely going there. So let's have a look. What did China do that nobody else has done? In last year, China did something quite remarkable on the moon. They landed on the other side of the moon. The moon is close enough to Earth that its one face is always locked looking at the Earth, and one face is locked looking out into space. Nothing before had ever landed on the far side of the moon. The Chinese did it, and here is a picture taken by the lander of its little rover, which was called Jade Rabbit. I don't know, Jade Rabbit sounded a very strange name for a rover to me, but apparently all Chinese children know the story of the Jade Rabbit who lives on the moon and who feeds the ruler of the moon, who is the moon goddess. So that's why they called the rover Jade Rabbit. That's a moon bunny instead of a moon buggy, you could say. Okay, let's move on. So the Chinese are doing things that are really original, and it's clear they're into moon exploration as well as Mars exploration. Who else is there? Well, I've got to mention the Indians. The Indians have already sent 2 spacecraft to the moon. Their third is about to go, Chandrayaan-3. And Chandrayaan is again, I think, a Hindu goddess of the moon. So that's the strange name. And that should be launched. Now, the Indians are developed enough in space exploration. They have their own launcher. And here is a picture of what their rocket looks like as it'll be launching to the moon in the not too distant future. Very exciting times to come. What are we Europeans doing? What are we British doing? Well, we're not totally out of the game. We're actually partnering with the Americans. It's a pretty exciting thing to do. And here we are with what's called the Orion Module. And the top half of that is the crew module. That's where the astronauts will go when they go to the moon. And here is something called the European Service Module that's going to be made by the old European Space Agency that I used to work for. And that does all the interesting stuff to me, all the engineering, because it has to look after the astronauts and help them navigate, help them move around. It's got rockets attached to it. It's a very big thing altogether, the Orion capsule. Nearly 26,000 kilograms in weight. That's 5 elephants, I'm told. And its height is 7.3 meters. That's as high as a house. So it's a very big thing. And here are the end-on views. And you can see these European solar panels are where the power is going to come. They'll feed into the service module and then keep the astronauts alive and allow them to navigate. Very exciting things to come. Well, even more exciting is, although the first trip to the moon may be just to the surface, the Americans plan to have a permanent presence in the vicinity of the moon called the Lunar Gateway. And this is a picture of it. It should be flying in not so many years' time, 6-7 years' time maybe. And that will be up there, allowing astronauts to travel from the Earth to the Lunar Gateway, and then they can pop down to the surface of the moon and pop back up to the station. Very exciting, and European astronauts should be involved too, because again, we're contributing to the Lunar Gateway program. The whole program's called Artemis. Artemis was the sister of Apollo. So there is a little echo of the Apollo program in the name of the whole program, Artemis. Okay, so I don't know. I'm very proud of this thing that we'll be taking the Americans and others to the moon in the time to come, that we're building in Europe and partly in Britain. But what else have we provided? Well, actually, the Orion module travels around between testing points in the United States and elsewhere in a great big aeroplane, all of its own. It's called the Guppy because people think it looks like a fish, the guppy. Frankly, if any of you keep guppies, it's an insult to the fish, in my view. There you are. That's built by Airbus, and the wings built in England, and there we are. So let's go on. I'm still feeling disappointed because back 50 years ago when I watched Apollo, honestly, by now I thought we would have places to live on the moon. So I'm going to close by talking about, or by showing you, building a house on the moon. This is not in the plan yet, but it is in the thinking. Here is a spaceship, an ESA spaceship by the labeling European Space Agency, on its way to the moon. It's going to land, and this is the plan, but at the minute it's more of a dream than a plan. What's it going to do? It's going to build a house for astronauts to live in on the surface, and watch how it does it. This is all planned. The architecture is all planned by a British company called Foster and Partners. They're based in London, in Wandsworth. And this is their plan for how you would build houses on the moon. Here's a little robot you would take along to do the building, and it will take the surface of the moon with its robotic arm, and then, well, what's it going to do next? Scoop up parts of the moon, climb up, and start covering up that balloon type thing, which is actually like a tent. They'll start covering it up with the lunar surface. Why do they have to do that? Well, the lunar surface is a dangerous place because there's no atmosphere. There's radiation from the sun and from the universe as a whole. And there are also meteorites and things like that. So you have to be protected. even so, the astronauts will have sunlight coming in through special windows. You can see the windows are open, and they will be able to exit and leave through an airlock onto the surface of the moon. Personally, I would love to see people living something like this on the surface of the moon. My only disappointment is we're not there now. 50 years ago, I was sure we would be there then. Thank you very much for listening. So hi there, Dallas, you're back?
Hi, David, how are you?
I'm just fine.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I don't know if you've been listening to some of the stuff we've been doing today, but that was absolutely terrific. We've been whizzing around the solar system
I've been
all
following
morning.
it. Hey, I don't get a day like this very often.
Hey, listen, I was very jealous because when you were doing the BBC broadcast back then 50 years ago during Apollo times, were you working with the great James Burke?
Exactly. Yes.
The young people, of course, won't know who James Burke is, but James Burke was one of my great science heroes. He was a great TV presenter, did loads and loads of science, but he was the main Apollo presenter.
You have every reason to make him a hero. For me, he was a hero.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a scientist, and on the Apollo coverage, occasionally I would be called upon to give advice. James could turn it into English.
There you go. He
had this capacity to explain. I mean, frankly, I thought he was a great communicator. He still is. For the Apollo 11 memorial that we did, the anniversary we did at Egglescliffe School in the Northeast in Stockton. At Egglescliffe, we had James Burke on video, and we talked together about those great days watching Apollo. He really took it to everybody in England and Scotland, Wales, everywhere the BBC could reach. Terrific guy.
We've got very little time, but I've got a couple of important questions that have come in. This is a very important question, and it's from Matty, I think, or Matthew, age 6. And he wants to know, David, what planet would you choose to live on and why? And you've only got a minute, so you've got to be quick, I'm afraid.
I'll answer very quickly. Earth, because I can breathe the atmosphere. I love the Earth. It's a wonderful place. But I actually enjoy going to the other planets in my imagination. Boy, would I love to fly over the surface of Mars.
Well said. I think, the human body has not evolved for space travel. It's difficult, which is why we need things like spacesuits and what have you. However, the human imagination is evolved for exactly that. The human imagination lets us roam all over the place, which is terrific. And it's free.
Yeah. So I don't know if that keeps you happy, Matty. I hope it does.
Well, I'm like you because I kind of grew up with Apollo. So the place that I want to go to is the moon, because I'd love to be on the surface of the moon, being able to look back at the Earth. And also, as you pointed out, all that Apollo hardware is still on the moon. I'd like to go and look at things like the Lunar Cod rover and the descent stages of the Lunar Module.
I know exactly what you mean. In fact, Apollo 12 went and landed beside the Surveyor robot spacecraft that was already there. That was the biggest kick. The idea of landing beside something that had already been sent from the Earth. I know exactly what you mean. There's something magical about it. It's the reason I mentioned Beagle 2. Wouldn't it be great to have a robot go and find Beagle 2? Yeah. I suggested that to the Americans, but they won't do it.
There you go. Well, actually, you have to be very, very quick. Final question. This is from David. And again, it's a really good question. And he wants to know, why do we hold space races? Would it be possible to move forward faster if we combined knowledge we have instead of competing? Well, it's a big question. You're going to have to do it very quickly.
Very quickly, David, you're absolutely correct. And it's the reason the Europeans are combining with the Americans. I'd like to see a world space exploration program with everybody joining in. But, politics gets in the way. But we're going to go exploring with the Americans, us Europeans, us Britons, which is at least part of it. And you're absolute. Space is for everyone. the universe belongs to everybody. And so I'm all in favor of doing it together.
I agree. I mean, certainly Artemis, which you touched upon, it is very much a joint mission, as you say. I mean, obviously the Americans are leading it. If it happens, I mean, what happens is new politicians comes on and the goalposts always slightly change. For example, like Trump has come in and like, right, we're going back to the moon, and no, we're going to Mars. No, the moon, Mars, moon, Mars.
You've got it, Dallas. Politics gets in the way. Next time I'm born, I'm going to come to a different planet without politics.
I think that is a very, very good idea. But certainly, I guess without it, I mean, we wouldn't. I mean, the Apollo program was very much a politically driven activity. It wouldn't have happened without the politics, I suppose.
If the Americans hadn't been racing the Russians, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Anyhow, listen, it was very great to do.
Lovely to talk to you. I just want to say, behind you, on the picture behind you, you've got a picture of I think it's Ed White doing the
brilliant.
The
yes, well recognized.
Well, I have the same picture on the front of my book, actually. So I'm a big Ed White fan. So
I am a big Ed White fan too. I've got 3 pictures of him, actually. They were painted for my 21st birthday by my little brother, who is the painter Ian Southwood. And he spent his whole career painting, but these were done for my 21st birthday.
Which was not so long ago, I'm guessing.
Oh, no. It was, I don't know, day before yesterday.
Yeah, well, there's actually there's a great tradition of art in space as well. Alan Bean, of course, was one of the Apollo astronauts.
Oh yeah, he's actually my favorite astronaut for exactly that reason. How do you express your feelings? Poetry and painting. That's all I can offer.
Well, I think that's good. And I want to encourage all the young people who are watching, you know, I think exploration, space exploration, yes, it's about science and about engineering, but there is, as you say, that expression through art and through poetry and through writing and through literature and through making television programs, and all this stuff is incredibly important. So there we go. I'm going to say cheerio to you, David. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.